The new director of the National Gallery in London says he wants the area outside his building to be cleared of street entertainers who include living statues of the Star Wars character Yoda, an Elvis impersonator and a man who shoots flames out of a tuba.
Gabriele Finaldi suggested he wanted to replace a noisy bagpiper with attractions more in keeping with a major art collection. Sky's David Bowden reports.
The National Gallery overlooking Trafalgar Square, one of the world's great showcases of art. But among the masterpieces there are misgivings about the rather lowbrow artistic offerings outside. The gallery's director, Gabriele Finaldi, is reportedly not a fan of metallic mime artists or levitating Yodas and would much prefer a genteel park on his doorstep. He wouldn't talk to us about it, but he does have his supporters.
The great majority of performers outside the National Gallery are living statues, i.e. they stand on hidden platforms, they stay silent for hours at a time, and they impress tourists supposedly by appearing to levitate. It's a one-trick operation.
Finding out what the performers themselves think about calls to evict them proves somewhat challenging. You don't speak English at all?
No speak English.
You don't speak English either? Where are you from?
Romania.
You don't speak English either?
No.
Where are you from?
Yeah?
Where are you from?
Romania.
The public, though, seem to love what the street has to offer and think Mr. Finaldi is missing the point.
Popular culture, high culture, all together. It's fantastic. That's why we come here.
My kids, we come 3.5 miles, well, 3.5 hours away from here, to a place called Stoke-on-Trent. They come here particularly to have a look at this kind of stuff.
I get where he's coming from. It's a bit of an eyesore, and it's, you know, dare I say, it doesn't contribute that well to the greats of the portrait painters. But hey, look, you know, I'm happy with it. It doesn't bother me that much.
Even within the art world, there are those that think the gallery needs to loosen up a bit.
I think anybody that is heading towards the National Gallery is not going to look at Yoda stuck on a pole and say, oh, I've had my art fill today, let's forget Rembrandt. You know, actually they're thinking, OK, we've seen this, we've had a bit of fun, let's go and see some real fine art.
I suppose, in supermarket terms, it's buy one, get one free in Trafalgar Square. High art and street art. Cheek by jowl. What's not to like? David Bowden, Sky News in Trafalgar Square.
So are street performers a colourful splash of good cheer in our city centres and a way for some to earn a living? Or are they tawdry distractions outside our temples of high art? Joining us here are the art critic Sue Hubbard and also Jonny Walker, founding director of the Keep Streets Live campaign. Jonny Walker, this is the National Gallery. Is it appropriate to be having a Yoda impersonator, Yoda out there, an Elvis impersonator?
What we should really ask is it appropriate for a leading national cultural institution to use their position to lobby and use a bully pulpit to clamp down on culture makers in a snobbish and highbrow way? That's the real question here. This is a major cultural institution, and they're actually calling for a clampdown on artists, musicians. They're fellow artists. They might be in a different context, but I think it's shocking because art is about breaking down barriers to participation, and a cultural institution like the National Gallery should be encouraging participation. It should be inclusive. It should be drawing people in. Indeed, it does draw people in. I think it's entirely the wrong message to send out, and if they're trying to send out a message, they've sent out the wrong one in the wrong way.
Sue Hubbard, is this snobbery by the National Gallery director?
Well, I'm not in the habit of sitting on the fence, but I think it's more complicated than this. I think the National Gallery are being a bit heavy-handed about it, but I have some sympathy because not all the performers are great. Some are fantastic. But, you know, you go to Barcelona and you go down the Ramblas and you're absolutely assaulted by one after the other. As I was thinking about coming on this programme, I thought, well, actually, there's a way around this. There's a good model already because the Tube. You have to be a busker, you actually have to audition, I believe, so you get some sort of quality. I'm not actually against performers, but some of them can be aggressive, some of them can hassle people, and I don't want it to become bland. I don't want it to become the garden bridge, you know, sort of, you know, for lovies only. But I think there needs to be some quality control, and it's not just a free-for-all.
Sue, do you think at some point we will get to the stage where it is like Las Ramblas in Barcelona, where every few metres you go, you do get swamped by a street
It would be if I mean, obviously, because a few years ago there were no performers out there, and it's obviously profitable for the people that do it. And I'm not against street performers per se, but it's the sheer number, and some are more tacky than others. And, you know, to say it's art, I don't agree it's art. Some of it's inventive, some of it's worth looking at. And it does keep the streets alive. I don't disagree with that. But it can't be unregulated.
Well, there's a misconception that busking is unregulated. It's a criminal offence to cause noise nuisance. It's a criminal offence to obstruct a highway. But the Mayor of London has already convened a task force by the GLA called Busking London. And the tragedy here really is that they've missed the boat, the National Gallery, because we're already working together with business groups in Trafalgar Square. There's a Busker liaison team.
Trafalgar Square is different to South Bank and Covent Garden, isn't it, where there's a lottery system for allocating places?
Well, it's public space as opposed to private space, and that's a really important and key distinction. The National Gallery is a wonderful national treasure, and it's a curated and highly managed space. But what we have here is an attempt to curate, effectively, the area outside the National Gallery. And that's a public space. It's chaotic, it's dynamic, it's vibrant, and an attempt to stifle that. I'm glad you brought up the Tube, because the Tube is another private space, so it's not a good analogy. And busking,
the entertainment on the Tube has improved considerably, hasn't it?
Intrinsically, busking is about three things. It's about democratic access to the space, it's about informality, and it's about spontaneity. And these things are lost in a managed scheme. In the Tube, there are sporadic auditions once a year. You have to call an 0870 number to book the space. There's only 32 spaces on the whole network. So it's a way of excluding people and erecting barriers to participation.
Yes, and we're talking about you can't set up stalls all around London. Of course, it is public space, but it needs. Where I differ with you is that it needs to be regulated.
Well, we're always hearing about freedom of expression as British values, and freedom of expression. We're not talking about stalls. We're talking about artists expressing themselves. We're talking about musicians.
Can I finish,
Let's
please?
finish.
I don't agree with you that most of it is art. I don't object to it on grounds of live performance. I don't object to it on grounds of live performance. We're not here to discuss that.
Well, we precisely are, actually, because you've just made the claim that it's not art.
If you want me to tell you, as an art critic, spending my life writing about it, what art is something that makes you see the world in a new way, that engages in a new way. A Jedi performer is not going to do that. A man dressed in bottles is not going to do that.
Adele started as a busker. So did Bob Dylan, so did Paul Simon, and are they not artists?
Is there any way of meeting halfway?
Well, I have already.
Voluntary permits scheme?
You're just not listening to me, because I said that I don't want the streets to be bland, and that I want them to be kept alive.
Well, that's very generous.
Please don't patronise me. It's about the fact that a lot of buskers can be quite aggressive, and I've had that experience, so it's no good saying, no, they're not. They are sometimes.
Final word, Jonny?
No, of course there are some performers that aren't God's gift to music. I'm not personally a fan of the flying Yodas. And of course there needs to be appropriate measures when there needs to be a system whereby if people have a genuine complaint, it can be dealt with. I agree with you there. There is room for meeting in the middle. There is room for dialogue. Unfortunately, that's already going on through the Busking London initiative.
And unfortunately, we have run out of time. But Jonny and Sue, thank you both very much indeed. Let's take a look at the weather now.